She said, "You're too broke to have an opinion," in front of her sister. So I stayed quiet, built myself in silence, and moved every dollar. 2 months later, she was standing outside my office, crying when the truth finally hit her. I am 30 years old, an auto mechanic from Houston, and I've spent most of my adult life with oil-stained hands and quiet pride in honest work. My girlfriend Lena is 27, a marketing assistant with an Instagram full of rooftop brunches and weekend getaways. We had been together for 2 years, long enough for me to think we were building something real. I helped her pay for her last semester of college, fixed her car whenever it broke down, and covered most of the rent while she chased her career. I thought love meant teamwork. Things began to change after she got promoted. She started dressing differently, speaking with new confidence, and spending money on things she could barely afford. She bought designer handbags on credit, joined expensive dinners with her coworkers, and spoke to me as if my job made me less. She laughed when I came home tired and greasy, made jokes about how I would not understand her corporate world, and said I should be grateful she was bringing class into my life. I told myself it was just a phase. I convinced myself she was overwhelmed with her new role, but deep down I knew something had shifted. I wanted to fix things to show her that I was proud of her. When she mentioned celebrating her promotion, I used my last savings to plan a special night. I cleaned up after work, borrowed a friend's jacket, and bought her favorite flowers. The restaurant was one of those high-end spots with low lighting, soft jazz, and expensive wine. I arrived early and waited, trying not to look out of place. When she walked in, she looked stunning, confident, and distant all at once. She hugged me quickly, thanked me for the flowers, and started taking selfies before even sitting down. Her sister joined us, along with a few coworkers. They were loud, talking about bonuses, vacations, and new cars. I sat quietly, smiling, trying to keep up with the conversation. Lena barely looked at me. Every few minutes she would glance at her phone or make a joke about how I probably did not understand what they were talking about. I told myself to stay calm. That tonight was for her, not for me. When her food arrived, she took pictures for 10 minutes before taking a bite. Everyone laughed. I just waited, tired but patient. Then came the moment that changed everything. One of her coworkers made a joke about success, about how money gives people the right to speak. Lena leaned back in her chair, looked straight at me, and said I was too broke to have an opinion. For a second, I thought I heard her wrong. Then her sister laughed, and the table followed. The waiter froze beside us, holding a tray, pretending not to hear. I felt the heat rise to my face, but I did not say a word. I just smiled politely, folded my napkin, and asked for the check. She thought I was being sensitive. She rolled her eyes and told everyone I could not take a joke. I paid the bill in cash, stood up, and told her I was heading home. She looked confused for a moment, then embarrassed. I walked out into the parking lot and sat in my truck. The noise from inside the restaurant faded, and the silence felt heavier than it ever had before. I stared at my reflection in the windshield and realized that something inside me had gone quiet, not in defeat, but in focus. That night, I did not text her. I did not tell anyone what happened. I just went home, showered, and lay awake thinking. I realized I had been trying to prove myself to someone who measured worth in likes and credit limits. I had been giving everything to someone who only valued what looked good on camera. I decided I would not explain my value again. The next morning, I got to the shop an hour early. I started planning new services, learning restoration work, and reaching out to local car clubs. I wanted to grow, not to show her I could, but to remind myself I was capable. She texted that afternoon asking if I was mad. I told her I was fine. Over the next few days, she acted like nothing had happened, as if her words were just air. I stayed polite, but my heart was no longer in it. In the weeks that followed, I worked longer hours, saved every dollar, and stopped waiting for her approval. The image of her laughing at that table played in my head each night, but instead of anger, it became fuel. It reminded me that respect is not something you beg for. It is something you earn by walking away from those who don't see it. And that was the night I started walking. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. She smiled as if the night before was a dream that had never existed. When she finally spoke, she asked if I was still mad and said she had only been joking. Her voice was soft, but her tone carried the same carelessness that had embarrassed me in front of her friends. I wanted to believe she was sorry, but I could see in her eyes that she thought she had done nothing wrong. To her, humiliating me was entertainment. I stayed quiet, pretending to accept the apology that was never really there. Over the next few days, she became even more confident in her behavior. She started comparing me to other men, mentioning her boss's new car, her coworker's expensive watch, and how her friend's boyfriend had taken her to New York for the weekend. Every story was another reminder that she thought I was behind. Each comment landed like a tiny cut. She stopped asking about my work or my goals, and instead made jokes about my shop smelling like gasoline. I realized that she did not see me as a partner anymore, but as someone she had outgrown. That week, I stopped trying to argue. Words had become useless. Every time I tried to explain how her attitude hurt me, she twisted it into another punchline. I knew if I stayed in that loop, I would lose myself completely, so I made a silent promise to shift my focus. Instead of explaining my worth, I decided to build it. I took extra shifts at the garage and accepted late-night repairs that no one else wanted. I watched videos about restoration, paint detailing, and business management during lunch breaks. My body ached from exhaustion, but my mind felt alive. I found something that had been missing for a long time, the quiet satisfaction of progress. When I stopped making myself available, she noticed. She called one afternoon, annoyed that I had not answered her messages. She said I had changed, that I was becoming boring. I told her I was just busy. She laughed in disbelief and said I was acting like I was saving the world. I hung up before she could say anything else. It was the first time in months that I felt in control. The silence that followed was peaceful, not lonely. 2 weeks passed before she called again. This time her tone was sharper. She complained that we never went out anymore, that I no longer made her feel special. I told her I was working hard to improve our future. She sighed and said she wanted to enjoy life now, not later. That sentence confirmed everything. She did not want a partner building a foundation. She wanted a prop for a lifestyle. I stayed calm, wished her a good night, and went back to tightening bolts on a project car. By the end of that month, our communication had nearly disappeared. She posted pictures at fancy restaurants, smiling with people I had never met. The captions were filled with words like success and freedom. I watched quietly, no longer angry, just aware. Every night, I worked until my hands went numb, but the shop started to change. What was once a small garage became something more. I began taking restoration requests from people who loved vintage cars. Word spread fast. In a matter of weeks, I had more clients than I could handle. The owner of the garage where I worked noticed my dedication and offered to partner with me on a restoration line. He said no one else stayed as late or took as much pride in their craft. I accepted, opening a new account under my own name. For the first time, I had savings that were truly mine. Each dollar represented a piece of dignity I had rebuilt from nothing. One night, around the same time Lena posted about a weekend trip with her coworkers, I finished a custom paint job that made the car look brand new. As I stepped back to admire it, I felt something shift inside me. I no longer wanted her validation. The sound of tools, the smell of polish, the sight of something I'd fixed with my own hands. That was the life I wanted. A week later, she texted me saying she missed how things used to be. I did not reply. Instead, I closed the shop and went home to rest. I knew what silence could do now. It was not weakness. It was power under control. She had spent months talking, laughing, and comparing while I had been building. Every insult she threw became fuel. Every joke became another reason to keep going. By the end of the second month, she had stopped reaching out completely. I saw her once from a distance, walking into the same restaurant where she had humiliated me. She was with her friends again, loud and glowing in her world of noise. I turned away and smiled. I had 20 clients waiting for their cars and a future that no longer included her. What used to burn like shame now felt like drive, and the man she once called broke had already started becoming someone she could never reach again. When the money started coming in, I opened a new account that was mine alone. Every hour I'd spent working in silence had started to pay off. The garage partnership I had built began growing faster than I could have imagined. I paid off every debt I had carried, upgraded all my tools, and leased a space of my own. The first night, I stood inside that empty building, smelling the fresh paint and motor oil. I felt a peace I had never known before. For the first time in years, I was not surviving. I was building. Clients began to pour in. People who had once ignored my small repair jobs now called asking if I could restore their cars. The work was endless, but it was honest, and every time I wiped my hands clean after finishing a job, I felt stronger. My name started to circulate around town, and within weeks, I was able to hire 2 assistants. We worked 12 hours a day, fixing engines, repainting classics, and reviving cars people thought were beyond repair. My hands ached, but the sight of my name on the shop window made every late night worth it. It had been almost a month since I had heard from Lena. I knew she was out there, still posting pictures, still chasing validation. Then one night, while scrolling through Facebook, I saw her name trending. Out of curiosity, I clicked. The first image that appeared was of her on a beach in Miami, holding a drink, captioned "Living the Dream." The next few pictures told another story. She was not alone. The man beside her appeared in every photo, wearing expensive clothes and wrapping his arm around her like they had been together for years. The comments beneath the pictures were brutal. People pointed out that she had bragged about affording her lifestyle on her own. Others accused her of pretending to be someone she was not. I scrolled for a while, feeling no anger, only a strange sense of distance. She had built her entire world on appearances, and now it was starting to crack. A week later, my phone rang late at night. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Her voice came through the line shaky and tired. She said she was having problems with her credit card, that the bank had frozen her account, and that she just needed a little help until her next paycheck. I leaned against my workbench, staring at the car I had been fixing, and felt a calm I could not describe. I told her that I was too broke to have an opinion, the same word she had thrown at me like a dagger in that restaurant months earlier. Then I hung up without waiting for a reply. 2 days later, she showed up at my shop. It was a Saturday morning, the busiest day of the week. I was under a car when I heard her voice calling my name. When I came out, she was standing there in expensive heels, her makeup streaked and her eyes red from crying. She said she was just passing by and wanted to see how I was doing. My employees stopped working for a moment, watching the scene unfold. She looked around the shop, her eyes catching on the freshly painted sign with my name on it. Her face froze. She blinked like she could not believe what she was seeing. I wiped my hands on a rag and told her I was busy. She tried to smile, said she was proud of me, that she always knew I would make something of myself. The lie hung in the air like smoke. I nodded, walked past her, and began helping one of the workers lift an engine. The sound of metal drowned out her voice, but I could still feel her eyes on me. She was not looking at the man she had left. She was looking at someone she never expected me to become. After a few minutes, she walked closer and said she just wanted to talk privately. I told her I had nothing to say. My employees looked uncomfortable but impressed. They had heard pieces of the story before, how a woman had laughed at me in front of a room full of people. Now, they were watching the end of it play out in real time. She tried one last time to reach me, asking if we could get coffee. I told her I had too much work and turned back to the car. She stood there for a while, silent, then left without another word. I watched her reflection in the shop window as she walked away, her steps quick, her head low. The same woman who once told me I was too broke to have an opinion had come looking for help and found a man who no longer needed her approval. That evening, I closed the shop early. I sat at my desk, staring at the sign with my name on it, the smell of engine grease and fresh paint filling the air. I thought about everything that had happened, how humiliation had become fuel, how silence had turned into power. I did not feel revenge or triumph. What I felt was peace. The kind that comes when you finally understand that you never needed to prove yourself to someone who was never listening. The next morning, the shop opened again, busier than ever. Clients lined up, phones kept ringing, and the same hands that once felt small now carried the weight of success. She had tried to break me with one sentence, and instead, she had built the man she would never get back. 2 months later, the shop was running at full speed. Every morning, the sound of engines echoed through the building before the sun was even up. I had partnered with a local racing team that needed quick, reliable repairs between competitions. They brought in steady business, and their success became tied to mine. Every job they handed me pushed my reputation higher. I hired 2 more workers, replaced the old equipment with modern machines, and finally bought a small house on the outskirts of town. It was nothing fancy, but it was mine, and every corner of it smelled like freedom. The nights that followed were quiet. I would sit on the porch after closing the shop, still in my work clothes, watching the neighborhood lights flicker on one by one. Sometimes I thought about how far I had come from that night at the restaurant. The same man who once felt small, now had something solid under his feet. The memory used to sting, but now it was like an old scar that no longer hurt. It reminded me of the exact moment everything changed. Lena tried reaching out again. It started with a short message saying she was happy to see me doing well. A week later, she sent a longer one, full of apologies and careful words about how proud she had always been of me. She said she missed my calm, my loyalty, the way I used to make her feel safe. The message ended with an invitation to talk, maybe just one dinner to catch up. I read it twice and felt nothing. There was a time when I would have given anything to hear those words. Now, they sounded empty, like echoes bouncing off a wall that no longer existed. I set the phone down and never answered. Life continued to unfold naturally after that. The shop grew busier each week, and I began teaching a few high school kids who wanted to learn about cars. Seeing them work with their hands reminded me of who I had been when I started, hungry to build something from scratch. They looked up to me, and for the first time, I realized I had become the kind of man I once hoped to meet. The lessons I learned from Lena had turned into quiet wisdom that I passed on without ever mentioning her name. Every so often, someone from town mentioned seeing her around. They said she had left her job after a fallout with her manager, that the new boyfriend had disappeared, and that she was trying to rebuild her image online. I never looked her up. I did not need to. The version of her that mattered had already served her purpose. She had taught me what it meant to be underestimated and what it